in Hausen, and it's a very nice name, Hausen. It reminds me one of my favorite characteristics of Dutch people, that they're so direct, so sincere. I mean, imagine a person from another country when seeing a bunch of houses, they call them a village or a town. Well, they call them houses. How cool is that? I live in Flanders country, which is 200 kilometers south, and I drove yesterday to here. It was supposed to be about 2.5 hours, it was more, so driving north. But actually that's not true. I was driving only 20% of the time. The rest, the car was driving itself. And that's one of the things which actually we owe to cybernetics. It's only possible because of that. But sadly, nobody refers to that as a cybernetic device. Although it's even simpler than Ashby's homeostat. But if that's an impressive device, then imagine another one. A system between a person and a machine that is even much more massive today. There are millions of instances of this cybernetic system every day. Do you know what it is? And you can use only that to teach the whole of cybernetics. Millions of instances every day today. Cybernetic system between a person and a machine. Any idea?
Thermostat.
Millions. Yeah, coming close. Yeah, yeah. That's selfies. In fact, you not only control the output directly with a very close loop before a lot of errors are amplified, but there you can also see the second order cybernetics, because you observe yourself, observing yourself. And then if you doubt that it's massive, there are 93 million every day. And if you think that's overstatement, it's understatement actually. This is only on Android and only in 2014. And if that was something which made you surprise you, the next cybernetic device would fail to surprise you. It's the centrifugal governor, which was actually invented in the 17th century, but it became popular with the steam machine in the 19th century. And, well, there is something common between these cybernetic devices. But governor was before the heyday of cybernetics, and the other two after. And they're very much cybernetic devices, but nobody refers to them as such. And it's a phenomenon I call cybernetics everywhere, cybernetics nowhere. Yeah. Is that a problem? Well, if you have asked me a few years ago, when I'm currently a recovering cybernetic geek, then I was a real cybernetic geek, and if I just present something to an audience like this, it would look something like that. For example, I would talk about the dynamics between the variety, because I'm not into the cybernetics of machines, I'm into the cybernetics of companies, management cybernetics. I would talk about this variety of stimuli, relative responses, and how they go into time. So you see something like that, three-dimensional space, and how they go in each and every moment. Until I realized that all that was wrong. Because, I mean, I was very pleased with myself. People were very happy. They said, yes, that's it. But in fact, I was living in my bubble. And last year we had this topic at disintegration that can burst this bubble. And then in 2013, I think, 14, I started doing that. I started explaining the things that I used to explain previously, but not using cybernetic vocabulary, so not using things like transducer, amplifier, filter, or channel, or in fact my goal was to teach radically systemic thinking habits without using the word system, and not even using models. Now, from this point on, I somehow need to demonstrate a bit how this goes on, which will be probably not, we won't give many new things, But then, as it was in the platform for change, I need to distinguish between the meta talk, what I'm doing now to you, and what I would normally do to an innocent audience. So let's say when I with my phone, then I'm doing the meta talk, and when I put it here, I'm doing the demo talk for the innocent audience. So have a look at this. So, what just happened? What just happened? What just happened is that it took you a second to see what's going on, another second that something is wrong, and another what's wrong. At the same time, we live in the world where we have much more absurd situations, and it takes years to understand what's going on, that something is wrong, and actually what's wrong. So I came to the conclusions that we need new glasses, and I call them glasses, not lens, because I do have lens and they change the thing, but they also, importantly, they have frames, and frames is a constant reminder that every perspective has limitations, produces a bias, and leaves a blind spot. And in addition, they are something made to fit to our bodies. My glasses would not fit a cat, although the internet is full of pictures like this. Here in the Netherlands, I can afford, without much loss of modesty, to call this a brilliant metaphor, because brill means glasses in Dutch. If we take this device to look at our organizations, what we see is, we see three balances. We see the balance between autonomy and cohesion, between stability and diversity, and between exploration and exploitation. If you hear me with this system or something else, let me know. And starting with the first one, so I'm a sailor, and in fact my boat was produced 100 kilometers in Friesland up north. This is called Hausen. That village is called Offenhausen. And so, if you're into boating, you would know that the time you spend sailing equals the time you spend maintaining the boat.
No, it's much more.
It's much more. I was trying to be encouraging to people. It's much more actually, and
much more.
It's quite difficult. But there is this joke among sailors that is actually very simple. If something doesn't move but should, you just lubricate it. If it moves but shouldn't, you fix it. So it's as simple as that. And so you can actually give a freedom or take out freedom. In organization, it's not so simple, but it's sort of the same principle. And the way to imagine it is, if you, I don't know how much of you go to an office, but if you go to an office one day, and it happens that you have 9 tasks, of which 6 you know how to solve, and 3 you need to find solution for, but you need to have enough time to do that in that day. But that's in the perfect world. In the real world, there is a manager who comes with a requirement for a new report, an expected one, a new meeting, and at that meeting you learn that one of the solutions that you wanted to apply could not be applied because there was a certain rule preventing this. So, at the end, what happened? You came with 6 things to do and 3 to solve and do, and finished with 8 things to do and 4 to solve and do. Why this is the case? Well, this is the case because of 3 factors: capacity, efficiency, and adaptability. Capacity is where you have a meeting point between demands and constraints, those that external that got translated to the tasks, those the internal, the interpretation of your organization, of how that should be done and what comes to you, and at the end is your own demands and constraint and your own capacity. Then it comes asthmatic decisions when organizations are small. In fact, all people are equally exposed to the consequences of their decisions. But when they grow, there is sort of a distance between thinkers and doers. So if you can think of a very agile animal like leopard in a small organization, but a bigger one, that would better fit a giraffe. When you have small brain very far from where the action is, and then the reason actually people get involved into this is the sense of responsibility, insufficient feedback, and mistrust that brings this high involvement, which could lead to micromanagement and less time for actual management, which brings more situations for which the team is unprepared. So limiting autonomy harms both short and long-term adaptability. But what happens when there is too much autonomy? When there is too much autonomy, what happens is pulling in different directions, inefficiency, silos, and problems with interoperability. At the extreme, the organization could simply disintegrate. And for that, we need cohesion. And cohesion is something very natural. There are natural forces like shared resources, work dependency, efficiency, synergy, and organizational identity. And I can spend 1 hour for each of them, and I do, but here I kind of can't afford it. Although I should actually, I'm one of the few, I'm one of the 2 paid speakers here. I confirm that. But apart from these external cohesion forces, there are also internal ones that contribute. The need to belong, safety, to reduce uncertainty, and to increase the self-esteem. All these work together with this. So all those things which were seen as bad previously, like the report, the meeting, and the rule, they're actually part of the tools from cohesion, and others like the norms, the rules, the goals, coordination, and planning, they come in as well. And all of them have one thing in common: they put more constraints. So we need to balance that. And here I do a lot of games. Well, that's one of my favorite games. We don't have time to do it, unfortunately. And there's another. I want to demonstrate how cohesion works with something we have, but that will be probably another time. The next message is that cohesion factors are internal and external. It's like making muffins. So a popular external factor is markets, where things that may not be dependent on each other inside the organization become dependent because they have, for example, clients that are talking to each other. But there are also others, various ones, like, remember when Trump was elected, he said, "I'm a unifier," and many people laughed, but he was right. In fact, there were many people that were not working together, but they started to work together, sort of, he brought cohesion to them as an external force. Interestingly, this balance, in fact, is nested in itself. There is balance in the balance in the balance in the balance. And one observation is that I had in several organizations, big ones, you may find certain units, certain departments, where this balance is kept perfectly. But in vain, because at the next level, where this thing is embedded in, it's not. Like, for example, in that case particular, the manager of that department was not allowed to hire and fire because of certain rules in that political institution. And then at the next level, it was again not kept because it was a federated organization and each big division had a lot of autonomy. There was no coordination mechanism, and so forth, which is experienced as this moving to decentralization and centralization when the extremes of one or the other kick in. So it's interesting to start looking for things which bring both autonomy and cohesion. And there are people that are already famous for that. One is Sir Tim Berners-Lee. So, I don't know, do you know what's the common thing between the first person on the moon and the internet? No, that's the point, that the common thing is that they happened in 1969. So you think we use the internet every day and don't associate that year with it. We don't use the moon every day, but know that year. And the reason is that internet was something very boring in the beginning. But then, at some point, it became interesting when the hypertext system appeared. And still, that wasn't enough. Until one of them was made an open standard, HTML, you know that, which brought the World Wide Web. So there was something that can give the freedom to everyone to publish, to developers to produce browsers, to produce programs, but at the same time, there is a cohesion because they comply with the standard. Everything is HTML, not the previous 10 different hypertext systems. Then it came with RDF, and then now it's the third wave, the third big project that he's making, again with a great tool that brings together autonomy and cohesion, and that's called Solid. So this is an attempt to bring back the web, basically, from the giants. So all these Facebook, Google, and so forth, they became monsters because they have this coupling between data and application. So he tries to make a new ecosystem where the applications are only views with the data. They're not coupled, again, with something that brings both autonomy and cohesion. Check it out, it's called Solid. No more time for this balance. We go to the next one between stability and diversity. And the best way to illustrate it with the immune system, which unlike organizations which are only 200 years old, it had millions to evolve and to really do it well. So we have pathogens that invade the body and certain things like B cell, this is a natural killer cells that try to prevent it. And the interesting thing is the B cell, which has these Y-shaped receptors that detach over the blood, and they need to mark the pathogens. Now this is a long story, I'll just shorten it with that. The main problem that they have to solve is that of uncertainty. The immune system have no idea who will invade the body, not at all. And how does it solve it? By enormous diversity. So the mutation rate of B cells is 1 million times higher than the other cells. And so there is several balances here that happen in quantity. I mean, having this mutation rate, having the chance to actually match. Then, when matching, they have to also balance not only the quality but also the quantity, which happens with the reproduction. That is interesting from a cybernetic point of view. That was just for you. And then there is interesting balance also that in fact it is very bad for other cells to have high mutation. They have low. Otherwise there's cancer and other things. So we have balance in the body between high mutation in B cells and all others that have to be protected. But this B cell balance is in fact nested in another balance, which is that between stability and diversity of organization. Then you can go on and on to the ecostability and ecodiversity. So basically I'm saying it all turtles way down. And, that is actually the way many systems work, like the beehives, they regulate the temperature this way because, okay, thanks, because they have different sizes and they start fanning and buzzing at different time, so that's the way they ventilate or they heat each other, otherwise the temperature would madly oscillate. And too much stability would bring things like homophily, things like groupthink, and stability itself is generally good, but there's also something which I would call bad stability, and bad stability is a phenomenon or package of phenomena called stability bliss, and another called pathological stability. So the stability bliss could manifest itself as organizational atrophy when the responses are not trained and they just got atrophies, and hyper-efficiency and organizational blindness. Logical stability could come in different forms. One is once you need more cohesion, you need somebody to actually coordinate that, but they use part of that power to stay in power. So, and there are a few more species which I'll talk about and I explain in detail here. Then there are external forces for internal diversification. If we have the situation now, it could be regulatory things like GDPR, it could be just competition, or a new trend like artificial intelligence. And companies have this bad habit of responding to those things by creating the internal mirrors to deal with them. So we have something, the compliance department, you have somebody that is taking up the AI and so forth, which diversifies and brings the other problem that you'll need then to coordinate additionally these things. And the last balance is between exploration and exploitation, which starts from ants that in fact manage to forage the food because they have this ability to follow the pheromone trails which evaporate for a certain period. If they do not evaporate at all, they will overexploit, and if they will evaporate too fast, they will underexploit, and then you keep that balance. But you can see that balance in the sand here. Against a nested balance, it's like a big fractal. So exploration would be the research and the exploitation would be the industry. But if you just take one of them, the research, inside we have also explore and exploit, which would be the market-driven research and the curiosity-driven research. Things like the crisis 2008, they pushed a lot the market-driven research, and the grants were given only by this criteria, which is quite bad. Because if you think about it, things like antibiotics, which is currently a multi-billion dollar industry, was something invented in the 70s out of curiosity-driven research. So it's a very funny paradox. And in organizations, the exploration appears as marketing, research, and innovation. But if you think of the whole market, then you have the startups that are many, but only a few are successful. And there were studies showing that most of them change their initial plans. So at the next level, we have again exploitation and exploration. So you can see these levels by a main organization, and also at the next level, organizations themselves as the exploratory devices on the planet. And also, you can see that in other things like Twitter, which is very interesting. One of the most used features is retweet, which is something which was not designed. It's something based on this balance between exploration and exploitation. And only later, when seeing how people use that, features appeared around this. And it's interesting, when the rate of change is increasing, normally you have exploration, exploitation cycles. When the rate of change is increasing, they go in parallel. Like this with application markets, when at the same time people explore by exploiting, bringing new, new unfinished applications, and then the way people use them, they again exploit and explore them. So both from the users and from the application developers, it goes in parallel. The main thing is that for exploration, you need to lift the constraints and to bring them back to exploit. And of course, you can see the three balances working together. I have lots of examples for that. One is, you can see just the way children play. So when they start playing, if the play is random, that would be not interesting. They need some kind of rules. You need to do that, you need to bounce the ball 3 times, or whatever. All these rules, they bring cohesion and they restrict their autonomy, and they could enjoy within this situation. But while they're exploiting this, they at some point they get fed up. So they start exploring, bringing new rules. And these new rules, of course, is trying out different things, where the importance of diversity comes. Until again they have the situation where they're in the fun zone, where they have stability for some time. So basically, that was just very briefly how it goes, but I wanted to mention details in this book that I'm writing, which I'm writing in a sort of an agile way, writing a bit like a prototype, giving to many people the feedback. So this very advanced prototype, like 70% is written, and whoever wants can take it and bring feedback. I will be very grateful. It's written at several levels. One is for the Linux, and obviously there's another that's in the notes for the rest, and several hundred references at the end. I would like to end with a story that some of you might know. So that's probably the Matty talk actually. A Buddhist monk opens a hot dog stand in New York. Yeah, but that's not the point. So the first client comes and asks for a burger, and the Buddhist monk gives him a burger. He takes it and gives $20. And nothing happens. So the client waits, and the Buddhist monk waits. The client waits, the Buddhist waits. And at the end, the client says, with a burger, "Where's my change?" And the Buddhist monk answers, "The change, my friend, must come from within."